Well, with 1 week right now until Election Day, next here at 7, we welcome back our hot button commentators.
Hard to believe it's just a week away. When we come back, Scott joins conservative Jim Milliman and Democrat Jasper Ward to break down the big races and issues you'll decide next week.
Come back to Wave 3 News at 7 in this edition of Hot Button. We'll break down the hot button issues facing voters next week, 1 week from tonight at the polls. Now, to help us do it, I'm joined by conservative Louisville attorney Jim Milliman and Democrat attorney Jasper Ward. Once again, attorneys rule. We'll have to talk about that in another show. We're just a week away from electing a governor, and incumbent Ernie Fletcher still trails Steve Beshear in every published poll. Last week, Jim, you said there was nothing he could do to turn this around. Do you still believe that? And if there's anything he can do, what would it be?
Well, what he's doing now, Scott, is he should have done months ago. He's now starting to run a campaign. He should have started running after the primary. He's being positive. He's talking about his accomplishments, but it's far too little, far too late. It's a runaway.
Jasper?
This is one issue we're going to agree on tonight, is that there's pretty much nothing that Governor Fletcher can do. Now it's just a question of how big the margin will be for Steve Beshear, and anything over 15 points would be a historic victory, and it would be a very big accomplishment for Steve Beshear. It
would take some kind of bombshell, something that just out of the blue to change this race?
No, it's not. Nothing can change the race now. It's over. And the only question now is what's going to happen with the Republican Party afterwards, and are the Fletcher supporters going to seek out revenge like Larry Forgey's threatening to do? That's the big question.
All right, and not only does Steve Beshear lead Fletcher in the public opinion polls, he also has a huge fundraising lead. In fact, he's raised more than $6 million. Fletcher's right at around $3.7 million. And usually it's the incumbent that gets the bigger numbers. What's the difference this time, Jasper?
Well, I think that people want to be with a winner, and I think that people are going to try to make Steve Beshear remember them when he's the governor. And I think, unfortunately for them, I think he knows who got him where he is, and that's the people of Kentucky. This race was over from the beginning, and I don't think that any of these late donors are really going to gain anything from giving to him this
Scott, we're back to business as usual. Beshear is going to give the money to the Democrats, and we're going to set this state back where it used to be when the Democrats ran. The people of Kentucky are the losers because the big money's now coming and given to Beshear, and I don't care if they just got on board a week ago. Beshear is going to do what Democrats always do. They're going to go with their money people. They've always done it, and that's why this state is in the predicament it's in, and we're right back to that same old hole.
I think,
what hole? What hole are you talking about?
The cesspool that the Democrats have put this state in. We wonder why we're last in everything, or near last. We had a governor who did positive things, and now we're going to go back to the same old system that put this state where it is today.
There are two things wrong with that. One, I think it's funny that he's blaming the Democrats for the mess that Fletcher has left in Frankfort. And two, I think he's confusing Kentucky Democrats with Washington Republicans who have shown the whole system of contributors getting favors.
You've been in office all but 8 years out of the last 100. Who do you think created this mess?
Well,
the Republicans didn't.
Well, I think Ernie Fletcher didn't do
everything.
Anything.
And now we're going to go
controlling
back.
everything in Washington. I think that's the Republican mindset is the
I'd
contributors.
trade Washington for Frankfurt any day.
Unfortunately, I think you're going to have either by the time next year's election's over.
Well, what are you going to do when Beshear drives? What's Beshear going to do about the pension fund when this state goes bankrupt under Democratic rule, which it's going to do?
Well, I was wondering what Governor Fletcher's been doing for
the
the
last 8 years.
He did a lot
about it.
We got to move on. The Peabody coal announcement, $3 billion facility. Yesterday, Governor Fletcher was in Louisville. He was here with officials to tout that about this plant going in western Kentucky. The legislature, of course, approving the $250 million in tax incentives. But House Democratic leaders say they weren't invited to this press conference yesterday. Was this politics down the stretch, Jasper, in this election?
I think it looks like that, but I think at this point, there's really nothing Fletcher can do. If this were a closer race, I mean, you know, he clearly didn't tell the Democrats that he was doing this, and that's politics. And I noticed that Senator McConnell was with him, and that seems like, you know, a page from his playbook. But at this point, it really doesn't matter. And what's important is that if this facility gets built and the jobs it'll mean for Western Kentucky.
Jody Richards, heed the words of the Terminator. Don't be a girly man. Quit your whining and do something for a change. You haven't done it yet. Let's see you do something.
They say they weren't invited to the
Well, they
press
shouldn't
conference.
have been. You know, they tried to kill that thing. It was Fletcher. It was Ernie Fletcher that got it through.
Well, unfortunately, Governor Fletcher didn't say they shouldn't have been invited. He said that they should have been there even though they weren't invited. So it's one or the other, but that's
all
okay.
right. Well, let's take a look at some of the other races.
Men.
We got some other
No
races on the ballot in Kentucky next week. Now, last week we talked about the vulnerability possibly of Secretary of State Trey Grayson. He is with Fletcher, of course, leading the Republican ticket, and could that hurt him? We have some poll numbers taken last week which show Grayson leading his relatively unknown Democratic challenger by only 6 points. Is Grayson out of the woods yet? Here's a supposedly rising star in the Republican Party, maybe someone who could be a gubernatorial or Senate candidate down the road. A loss would be huge in his career. Jim?
Well, I think a loss would put him out. He's going to pull it through, Scott, and I think one reason he's going to pull it through is because of the presence of Richie on the ticket. There are a lot of people that will split the tickets solely because of Richie, and I think that's going to be enough to give Trey Grayson the margin he needs. And Trey, I think, is going to be the next governor.
I think that, well, I disagree with that last point, but I think that Trey may pull it out. It's going to be very close, but I think he may be the baby that's thrown out with the Republican bathwater in Frankfort.
All right, now the Kentucky Attorney General's race seems to be getting really nasty here. Democrat Jack Conway leading in most of the polls, but the Republican Stan Lee has an ad calling Conway dishonest, claiming he accepted illegal contributions in his race for Congress 3 years ago. Conway's ad saying that, well, he's got others calling him a wingnut and an extremist, referring to Lee. Why is this race so contentious, Jasper?
Well, I think Stan Lee knows that he really has nothing left to do except for throw as many negative and, frankly, untrue things he can at Jack Conway. I think if you looked at in the dictionary for desperate, I think you'd find Stan Lee's picture next to it.
Well, Jack Conway, he's honest, he's ethical, he's liberal, but he's going to win. And I think he's going to make a heck of a good attorney general. But I'm not going to stand for anybody to call Jack Conway dishonest, because he is an honest person, and I really resent that.
All right, thank you guys, and we're going to be back with much more here as we continue Hot Button with the library vote coming up in Louisville in just 7 days. We'll talk about that coming up. Voters in Jefferson County will decide in 1 week if they want to raise taxes to support the library system here. Basically, another 0.2% on your occupational tax out of your paycheck. About $100 a year out of a $50,000 salary. Now, a poll by a Louisville TV station last week showed some voters supporting it. 49% yes to 28% no, a lot of undecideds. Does that surprise you, Jasper? Will it pass? Should it pass?
Well, it doesn't surprise me. I think it will pass. I think it should pass. I think that it is a tax increase. I'll go ahead and say what he's going to say. But I think that people support the libraries, and I think people are willing to pay a little bit more in taxes if they know what it's going to and it's going towards something they support. And I think that you can't argue with libraries and the impact on the community. And I think that when people realize that it's going to support the libraries,
Scott,
they're going to support it.
This campaign is a fraud. It always has been. They're hiding under the fact you like libraries. The Courier runs these puff pieces. They have puff editorials. The fact is, it's a 9% tax increase. And we see today natural gas is going to go up 10%. The elite of this community, the rich, are putting their little project, their library projects, in the back of the working man and the poor working man. And it's a very dishonest campaign. Put on the ballot. You want to raise it 9% to pay for the libraries and see what happens.
Talking about gas companies raising money, it's a great segue to Senator McConnell, I think.
All right, we're going to talk about Senator McConnell. He's not on this year's ballot, but he has been the target of recent TV ads, and some polls say he may be vulnerable in next year's race. That's right, that's next year. One poll release shows he has 47% of Kentuckians approving of the job he's doing, 46% not. Could he possibly be in some trouble, Jim?
No.
Yes.
Mitch McConnell is a great statesman, but he's also a great politician. There is nobody in the Democratic ticket that wants to take him on. And Ben Chandler is supposed to be your hero. He's a Democratic hero, and he's afraid to take McConnell on. He wants to wait till Bunning. Hey, Ben, take on McConnell. If he's so weak, go to the Senate now.
Jasper, could he?
I think he absolutely could. I think Senator McConnell is vulnerable next year, and part of it is the national mood against Republicans, and Senator McConnell is tied up in that as the leader of the Republican Party in Washington. And I think Congressman Chandler may take him on. I think he's very happy where he's at.
He doesn't have the nerve to take him on.
Well,
Nor does any Democrat.
Say that to General Chandler's face.
Right. They're not going to take him on.
I think somebody will take him on, and I think they'll beat him.
Mitch is going to be back in Washington. No question.
Jasper, thanks so much for joining us here for Hot Button, and we're back with much more news, of course, tonight at 11. Thanks for joining us here at 7.